All right, we're here for interview number 5. Today I'll be interviewing one of my favorite people ever. This is Jarrod Vance. He is a middle school English teacher in Ashland, and he's going to be talking a little bit about what it looks like currently for him as we move forward and the education still goes. So, Mr. Vance, thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Why don't you start with giving people a little backstory, how long you've been teaching, what exactly you teach, and just give people some insight into you.
All right. This is actually year 13 of teaching. I have taught the entire time in Ashland. My first year, I taught 8th grade history, and ever since then, I have been a 7th grade language arts teacher.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, what does the current classroom look like for you as we obviously adjust to not being able to go outside of our houses, and you guys have to keep turning with what you're doing?
It's definitely a lot different. I went from being in person with 30 people in the room and one person trying to help them all out to one person sitting in his living room every day trying to help all 30 electronically and virtually. So it's quite different. Basically, we're working our same work day, so still working from 7:30 to 3, and doing what we can to still give out quality instruction and reach the kids as much as possible. I know we get logged in at 7:30. We start getting questions. We start getting emails, information. We're still meeting, so we do have our meetings grade level wise and just staff meetings as well virtually. So those are nice to keep updated on. But yeah, so it's just a matter of how do we still give instruction? How do we still reach all of the kids? How do we provide kids with different things that they need when we're nowhere near where they are? So it's been a challenge.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you've had to do to still give that instruction? Are you using videos? Do you guys get to do any virtual meetings with the students? What does that look like from your standpoint?
A lot of us I know have been recording videos, which is, I mean, at least they're still getting instruction. So,
Yeah.
we find perfect spots in our house. I still have not found the perfect spot in my house to do a video. But yeah, we're finding spots and we're doing the lesson just like we normally would. It's really hard to do a lesson to nobody in the room.
Right.
There's no questions, there's no banter, there's no sarcasm, there's no anything that goes into actual teaching. But yeah, that's how we're trying to do it. We're delivering all of our instruction electronically. So fortunately, we've used a lot of these platforms already at school, whether through Google Classroom, different types of technology as well. So the kids are aware, they know what to do. So that's been the nice part. They know how to log in, they know all of that stuff. So it's just a matter of watching the videos and trying to work as they go. I will say that reaching out to kids has been very important. One of the directives has been we need to still make the connections with kids that we have. And as teachers, we all have those strong connections. We all build relationships with kids. And with them not being there, with them being at home, sometimes their parents are still working. Sometimes parents aren't, and they're having to go through 3 or 4 other kids worth of work that they have. So it's been tough for them on their part as well. So we've been trying to reach out as much as possible through email, phone calls. Yesterday actually, I did a live Google Meet with 2 of my classes. So I invited 2 classes to join me live, and that worked out really well. And I will say it was really nice to see the kids. For me, and I know most of the other teachers out there, we are missing them. It's
definitely,
there's this idea that we're all on break right now, and that could not be further from the truth. We are not on break. We are still working. Some days I feel like I'm working harder right now than I usually do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you're trying to reach out to, I have 85 kids, but say the teacher has 140, you're trying to make connections with 140 kids each week. So we're doing it. It's just been a challenge.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges I think for teachers? Because obviously I think back to my middle school days, and you have the breakdown of periods. But how are you able to kind of separate your work and all the other work that is needing to be done? Because I'm assuming there's a lot more like handouts or things for kids to do right now, obviously with not being able to be in the classroom and have that in-class time. So how are you guys kind of balancing that act of when you're talking to them and when to like get in contact and all the work that you guys are passing out to make sure that they're not getting burnt out or not having too much on their plate?
Right. Well, one of the important things is that, as I know, as like my 7th grade team, we are trying to have conversations about what everybody's doing so that we don't overload the kids too much.
Mm.
Because if we're all assigning a really large amount of work and nobody knows what anyone else is doing, you're going to burn the kids out pretty quickly with what they need to do. So that has been important, trying to have those conversations. We have a meeting scheduled for Monday, so we can talk about that for next week as well. I think a lot of us are posting stuff on Mondays and kind of giving the kids kind of free reign throughout the week to work on it as needed. Any due dates that we're posting are flexible due dates right now because you never know if kids are having trouble with Wi-Fi, internet access, if they just didn't understand the lesson and things like that you're trying to help them out with. So that's been a big thing. We also have a running document to know who's touched base with what student so that we aren't making like the same phone call 4 times a day. So that's been big too, the communication piece for us. So we've been trying to make sure that we are reaching out to the kids we need to reach out to. But our biggest goal is that every student gets some type of contact throughout the week, whether it's a student who might be missing an assignment, who hasn't logged on, or a student who's done everything they needed to do. They still need that connection. They still need someone to reach out to them and touch base with them and see how things are going. So that's been huge for us, is we're all just trying to make sure that every kid has some type of teacher interaction throughout the week. Yeah, so, that's where these Google Meets that we've done, that's where the videos that we've done, that's where those things have really helped out and give kids an opportunity to not only look back at things, but also, I don't know how much they're interacting with their peers right now, with us kind of on a lockdown. So yesterday it was almost like they were really excited to see each other. At times it was like, all right, everybody, you got to mute your laptops. You got to stop. You got to talk to. But it was all because they were just excited. They were excited to see each other and have conversations. So
cool. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are also some of the challenges other than not being able to be right on top of them, but with students that may not be getting their work done and having that new balancing act of being understanding to the circumstances, being like stuff we have never seen, but then also still needing to give them a push that they still need to be getting this work done and they still need to be doing it adequately. What are some of the things that you've kind of found in the journey so far with being able to stay in touch and stay on top of students for what they need to do and being compassionate too for the circumstances?
Well, the biggest thing is you can't just assume they're not doing it because they don't want to. You have to assume that there's a reason that something's not getting done. And that's where those connections, that's where those contacts, that's where that becomes important. That's where reaching out to parents and just saying, hey, I want you to know that they haven't done this, but if there's a reason, let me know. If it's because Wi-Fi's been spotty or they haven't been home or whatever the situation may be, as long as we know, we'll take care of it. That's why those due dates have been pretty flexible, because obviously it's a whole new situation. We're all learning as we go. I'll admit, the first week that we were doing this, it's like you sit with these kids and I have them for 90 minutes at a time. So I'm like, okay, I can assign this much work because this is what I might assign when we're actually at school. But then as you're sitting and going through the week, you're like, whoa, that was way too much. There is no way they're able to keep up with that. So it's even for us, it's a big learning experience. We went from finding out on a Thursday afternoon that we were pretty much done for the next 3 weeks, having one more day with the kids on Friday, and then Monday hitting the ground running and not really having any experience with anything like this before. And I mean, that's the same on the opposite side. It's the same with students, the same with parents. None of us have been through this before. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you have to assume that everybody has the best interest in mind of what's happening. Everybody's trying to do the right things. And so if things aren't happening, that's just where you need to reach out and have conversations. I know there are some parents who are probably, I've called a couple times and they're probably like, oh my gosh, what this guy's doing. And I totally get it. Get it. Because it's not, I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to be any type of problem for them at all either. It's just,
Right.
I'm trying to connect with the kids as much as possible. And that's what my coworkers are doing too. You know, we're so used to having that time with the kids and working right there with them. So when we're not there with them, it's a struggle. And
Right.
you know, when parents are working and they have to come home and after work, they're becoming teachers, that's tough. You know, it's a long day. And so you have to just assume that everybody is doing what they wanted, or not what they want to do, but what they mean to do, what they need to do. And if things aren't, that's just where those conversations need to happen. So
Yeah.
I
And
would say we're looking good. Like we have 85 to 90%, you know, that are staying on top of things. So the 10% is, you know, what can we do to help? That's always the first thing. What can I do to help? What can we do to help? What can we do to help in the situation for resources or whatever it is? So reaching out that way and realizing that we have the compassion first, and then going, okay, if everything's good, now let's sit down and do some of these things. I will mention too, one of the things that some of us have tried to do is I've been meeting with kids through Google Chat a couple days a week. So we'll set up a time. And so that way they can do that. And while they're working on an assignment in Google Classroom, I can be right on that same document and giving them information and giving them help as they go. So that's something that we've just started too with some kids who have been struggling with work. And that's been very helpful because they're getting immediate feedback. They're getting us right there with them. And even though it's not in person, they're still getting what they need. So that's been a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. I think just as humans, if you don't know what you're doing and you can't have help, it's that basic nature just to kind of put it off and just wait instead of asking for help. You keep bringing up the parents. And so how has their role kind of increased with being in virtual education mode? Have you been relying on them more than you typically would being in the classroom just because they have to kind of be your eyes and ears and they may speak up more when your kid won't? How has their role increased and how have you kind of relied on them to help you guys out with this process?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think for us, I don't know if you saw, there's been a ton of memes and a ton of social media jokes about how parents are becoming teachers and how they've already lost their job or kids are suspended or things like that. And it's pretty funny. But we have had to rely on them a lot more lately. And again, it's not at all like we're trying to be bothersome. It's just what can we do to help? I think for me, I always try to go through the kid first. So if I can email them first, or if I can send them a text through Remind, which is how we do things through school, we can even set up Google phone numbers and have our own separate phone number to give out to help people. That's not our actual phone number. So that's been nice too. But if you can reach out to the kids and kind of, here's the situation, here's what's missing, what can I do to help? Let's put a plan together, that kind of thing, and see where that goes. And if you don't get any interaction with that in a day or two, that's when you kind of start to reach out to the parents and say, hey, here's what can I do? That kind of thing. I think for us, you know, honestly, we're all in a new situation and nobody really understands what any of us are going through, you know? Nobody understands the teacher side. Nobody understands parent side. Nobody understands the student side unless you're right. You know? I understand the teacher side, but I don't understand the student side because I'm not on their side. I don't necessarily understand the parent side either. So it's one of those situations where you have to truly be compassionate about the situation, willing to work through the situation, give solutions, but not be there to hurt or provide consequences to in a virtual way. Like, I don't know how I do that, but in a virtual way, you have to be there. So obviously we have to rely on them more. And I think most parents they totally understand where we're coming from and they're willing to help. And I don't think there's been any parent who's been upset. It's just, how do we all make this coexist, especially if we're going to have to continue past the next couple weeks doing this too. So
great. So kind of building off that a little bit, what's the biggest adjustment for you that you really didn't think you were going to have to make, or it wasn't even on your radar, and then you got into it and you're like, oh, holy cow, I really have to, like, this is something that I really wasn't even thinking about, but is really important in this time?
Yeah. Well, I can say two, and one is going to sound pretty stupid, but I'll go with the non-stupid one first.
Okay.
As I was talking about the workload earlier, you know, I understand how to teach a 90-minute class and get kids to get things done in that 90 minutes time. I can plan out for when things will happen. I can plan out for how long things are going to take. In a virtual world, that's not the same thing. You know, I can't plan for them to do 10 things throughout the week like we might have done. Instead, I might be able to only plan on 4. So I think a big thing for us is adjusting to what can we expect the kids to do. And we were kind of tasked to go slower first and then kind of build up as we go. Yeah. I think some of us may have started off the opposite. I'll admit I started the opposite route. I went a little heavy in a couple of classes. And then throughout the week, I'm like, okay, I went way too much. Yeah. So and this week it was, how do I bring it down a little bit more? Next week is going to be the same. So it's a matter of realistically, what can everyone accomplish? I mean, if you're sitting at home all day working on 4, 5, 6 different classes and you're trying to get it all done, how much time are the kids spending? You know, are they spending the 7 hours? Because that probably isn't realistic. Getting them to spend 7 hours is going to be tough. Right. So knocking it down to 3 or 4 hours maybe, and realizing that they need breaks just as much as we need breaks in between balancing it. So that has been the one, and that's my non-stupid one. The second one, my stupid one, is I don't have my materials here at my house. You know, something I don't have them. So the other day I was thinking, wait, how do I do this lesson and I don't have a whiteboard? You know, what do I write on? Right. Fortunately, I had brought home some big chart paper that I had in my room, and so that's what I used. But if I didn't have that, I have no idea how I would have written stuff. You know, like I've had pieces of papers taped all over the house, paper plates. I would have gotten creative. We all would have gotten creative, you know.
Definitely,
What do we do? So that's kind of my more stupid one. But
just magnifying Post-it notes.
Exactly. And funny you say Post-it notes. On my desk at school, I have like 6 Post-it notes to remind me of everything. On my coffee table, I have about the same 6 Post-it notes right now with all of my notes on things to remind me of. So it's quite the adjustment from school to home.
Sure. Yeah. And some similarities and some huge differences. You need to go to Home Depot and get some of that the dry erase paint, you know, and then just start writing on your wall.
Yeah, that's true.
Take up all that space. Yeah. If you can do that safely.
I can just write with Sharpie all over the wall and just paint over it. Like
and don't you already do that?
Right, exactly.
One thing I thought was really interesting is you talking about having to scale it back a little bit. Would you, in some way, would this kind of compare to the beginning of a new school year where you're kind of adjusting to the newness of the students, they're getting used to you, or especially with you teaching, well, I guess it's different because they come in 6th grade now. But is there any similarities between the beginning of a school year and kind of right now with some of the changes that you guys are having to kind of go through, or is it kind of not comparable at all?
I would say it's somewhat comparable. You know, the first week you're all trying to learn each other and figure out who each other is. You're also learning the ability levels of your kids, you know, because they range and everybody's needs are different. Everybody's levels are different, you know, so you're trying to figure that piece out. So once you get past the first and second week, you start to realize kind of what the kids can handle and how much you can plan for them to do. So you make a good point in relating it back to that first week, because I can never judge planning until I've gotten to know the kids. And when it's almost like that situation, I know the kids, but this is a totally different environment. So how do we make sure their needs are being met? How do we make sure they are not being pushed too hard? How do we make sure they're not being given all this work to do that's just burying them? And sometimes when you look at that list of, holy cow, look at all that stuff I need to do, it's just easier to start on it, you know, because you don't even know where to start.
Right.
So it's very comparable to the fact that you kind of have to get to know the situation. So that's one, if I guess if I had a regret in how I've handled things in 2 weeks is I wish I would have let it kind of work itself out. And kind of see where we could go before I pushed too hard. I mean, none of the kids have really complained when I've talked to them, but I'm sure they've had some struggles along the way. So
sure.
So yeah.
It's definitely just going to be a consistent learning curve as you guys kind of go along, and there's going to be different challenges that come up. Well, what would you say? I mean, some of obviously virtual learning, the capability of being able to do that. What are some of the positives from this experience that you were kind of seeing, and obviously some of the negatives too, which I think you've touched on a little bit of not having the community and not being able to be there to help them, but just any others that may come to mind.
Yeah. I mean, for positives, there's not a whole lot, because this is not a situation that I think any of us really enjoy being in. We realize we need to be in it, but we don't we don't really like it. I will say some positives have been I've learned new things. And so when you're learning some new technologies, you're learning how to take videos, you're learning how to reach the kids in alternate formats. I think that's cool. It's all about trying to learn new things and how do we make things good for the kids? How do we make things better for ourselves? So I think that's been positive.
Sure.
I also think for the kids, one thing that's been a positive is they've been able to work at their own pace. And that's kind of the same for us. We've been able to kind of, work on things that we feel we need to work on more so than others as we're continuing in our workday. It's clearly if we're not doing what we're doing, which is teaching, because we're not up and teaching every day, is how do we prioritize and how do we make sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck virtually every day. So, that's been a learning thing, and it's been a positive, but it's also been a negative, it goes along with that. I mean, those are my major positives, besides the fact that I can sit in my pajamas all day and nobody can.
Right. That's a positive for all of us. Yeah.
Exactly. But truly the biggest negative is not having the kids there. That's the reason we all go into teaching is for the kids. And so when you don't have the kids there, you don't have the opportunity to work with them. You don't have the opportunity to banter with them. You don't have the opportunity to be sarcastic with them, to build relationships with them, to help them out as they go. That's been a struggle. I'm a very relational teacher. I'm all about if you build the relationship, you're going to get what you can out of them for the entire year. And even though that relationship is still there, it's hard for me to be who I am or what I do on the phone. It's hard for me to do that through even a Google Meet because you're still not able to be yourself because it's just not what you're used to. Right. So that's been a definite thing. But I will say, and I mentioned this earlier, seeing the kids yesterday was awesome. I think it was awesome for all of us just to see each other and talk to each other and, realize kind of, we all want to be back there, even though some people won't admit it. Back there.
Right. So, just that ability to connect instead of just being locked in your house working on schoolwork or whatever that may be. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then I guess we'll just kind of close with this, Vance. What is something to kind of take from, or your positive thought, or something that you would want people to take away from this conversation about where we're at right now, virtually with education, or where we're at in the world? Just kind of something that you would want to spread to the people.
Well, I'm gonna go cliche, and it's funny because I had a friend tell me yesterday they're so tired of hearing this because it's just all the time. But truly, we are all in this together.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to work together to make everything work. And it's not just education. It's everything right now. We truly have to rely on each other, rely on our neighbors, our family, our friends, those things to get through the situation. I want to be back at work so badly. And I'm sure there are other people out there too. And I know sometimes you're like, really, you want to be at work? Yeah, I do. And other people do as well. So if we could make it a situation where everybody is trying to help each other out and everybody's doing their best and we're all just trying to keep our social distance and, practice our hygiene, washing our hands, which you think you don't need to practice. I mean, you do, but you need to practice more so than you usually might. So, it's just doing those things to make sure we're all staying healthy and we're staying good. And as a teacher, and I'll say this probably for every teacher, I don't know that I should speak for every teacher, but I'm going to. If there's parents out there, students that are watching this, and anything comes up, we're right here. We're always willing to help. We're working. We'll help. The way we help is going to be different, but we'll do what we can to help everybody out, students, parents, whatever. So we're here and we're ready. So help each other out, stay together. I mean, that's kind of the message, right?
Definitely. Yeah, it's a good message. So awesome, Vance. Thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation. It's always good to hear your perspective and hear you talk about things, especially when it comes to teaching. So thanks for your time, Vance.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.
Yep. See you later.
Yeah.